The sun
This
hadn't yet
place hasn't
cleared the
changed a
Sierra
bit,
Nevada
Betty.
peaks
We
when
try to
Evelyn
keep it
Thorne's
that
alarm
way.
clock rattled to life
Good
at
to see you.
You
5:45
too.
a.m. She
How's the head
silenced it with the
today,
practiced
Martha?
motion of
Oh,
someone
much
who'd been
better.
waking
Thanks
at
for
this hour for
asking.
40
Good.
years.
Take it easy now.
The bedroom was still dark, but she didn't need light to navigate the
Let's
modest
ride.
two-bedroom ranch house on Pinewood Drive. Her feet knew every creaking floorboard, every worn patch of carpet. She sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, allowing her joints to
Cheers
remember
to
their
the
purpose.
harvest. Best festival yet.
76 years
Absolutely.
had
The
taught
whole
her that
village is
rushing
here.
led to
To good health
falling,
and friendship.
and falling at her age meant hospitals and worry. She reached for the reading lamp on the nightstand, its base shaped like an old-fashioned lantern, a gift from Garrett 3 Christmases ago. The warm light spilled across the room, catching the silver frame on the opposite nightstand. Harrison Thorne looked back at her from 2018, his last good year. He stood in front of his garage, arms crossed, that slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. The smile that said he knew something you didn't, but he'd never lorded over you. She touched the frame lightly, a morning ritual she'd never spoken of to anyone. "Morning, Harry," she whispered. "Another day." The house settled around her with familiar sounds. The furnace clicking on, the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. Outside, she could hear Mrs. Kowalski's sprinklers starting their morning cycle right on schedule. Silver Ridge, Nevada was a town of schedules and routines, and Evelyn Thorne appreciated that. There was comfort in predictability. She moved through her morning with quiet efficiency, shower, dress in her waitress uniform powder blue with her name embroidered over the left pocket, though everyone who came into Wynn's Diner knew exactly who she was. Hair pinned back, sensible shoes, a touch of lipstick because Harrison had always said it brought out her smile. In the kitchen, she prepared breakfast with the same careful attention she gave everything. 2 eggs scrambled, not fried. Her cholesterol wasn't what it used to be. 1 slice of whole wheat toast. Black coffee in the mug Garrett had made in high school pottery class, slightly lopsided and precious beyond measure. She ate standing at the counter, looking out the window at her small backyard. The rose bushes needed pruning. She'd get to them this weekend, weather permitting. As she rinsed her dishes, her eyes fell on the photograph held to the refrigerator by a magnet shaped like a Harley-Davidson logo. Garrett had 19, all lean muscle and cocky grin, standing beside his father's 1978 shovelhead, his first real ride. Harrison had his arm around the boy's shoulders, both of them covered in grease and grinning like they'd discovered the secret to happiness. Maybe they had. She touched the photo gently, then checked her watch. 7:15. Time to go. The drive to Wynn's Diner took 12 minutes, exactly as it had for the past 8 years she'd worked there. Her 2008 Ford F-150 Harrison's truck, really, but hers now rumbled to life with the familiar diesel clatter. She'd learned to drive stick shift at 16, had taught Garrett the same when he turned 15. Some skills you never forgot. Silver Ridge looked its best in the early morning. The town of 4,000 souls stretched along Highway 50, the loneliest road in America, though locals knew better. There was nothing lonely about a place where everyone knew your name, your business, and usually your problems before you did. The morning sun painted the false front buildings downtown in shades of gold and amber. Mitchell's Bakery was already open, the scent of fresh bread drifting across Main Street. Dalton's Hardware displayed a new shipment of garden tools in the window. She pulled into Mitchell's parking lot, leaving the engine running. Wallace Dalton was arranging bags of fertilizer on the sidewalk, his permanent work uniform of flannel and denim, as predictable as the sunrise. "Morning, Wallace," she called him through the open window. "Still fixing that old Dodge yourself?" Dalton looked up, his weathered face creasing into a smile. "Yes, ma'am, Mrs. Thorne. My daddy taught me if you can't fix it with your own 2 hands, you don't deserve to drive it." He straightened, pressing a hand to his lower back. "Though I'll admit these hands aren't what they used to be." "None of us are," Evelyn said, not unkindly, "but we keep going." "Yes, ma'am, that we do." He gestured to the bakery. "Martha's got fresh bear claws this morning. Your favorite, if I recall." "You recall correctly." Evelyn smiled. "I'm picking up a dozen for the diner crew. You have yourself a good day, Wallace." "You too, Mrs. Thorne. You too." She parked and headed into Mitchell's Bakery, where Martha Mitchell, no relation to the bakery's founder, just a happy coincidence, had a white box already prepared. "Morning, Evelyn. Dozen bear claws, 2 apple fritters, and I threw in some extra cinnamon rolls because Wynn mentioned yesterday business has been good." "You're too generous, Martha." "Generosity is just good business with better intentions." Martha rang up the order, waving away Evelyn's attempt to add a tip. "You tell Wynn I expect him at church this Sunday. He's been dodging Pastor Richards for 3 weeks." "I'll tell him, but you know Wynn. He says he gets closer to God working Sunday brunch than sitting in a pew." Martha laughed, a sound like wind chimes. "That man could talk his way out of Judgment Day itself." You drive safe now. Back in the truck, Evelyn balanced the bakery box on the passenger seat and continued toward the diner. The morning ritual, the familiar faces, the comfortable rhythms of a small town, these were the things that made life worth living at 76. She'd survived the loss of her husband, the worry over a son who chose the open road over settling down the small indignities of aging. She'd survived because she understood something fundamental. Life was built on these small moments, these brief connections, these morning exchanges that confirmed you were still here, still part of something larger than yourself. Wynn's Diner occupied a corner lot on Main and 2nd, a classic railcar-style building with red vinyl booths, a long counter with chrome-edged stools, and a jukebox in the corner that still played if you hit it in just the right spot. Winston O'Malley had owned it for 32 years, having bought it from his father, who'd bought it from the original owner in 1954. The continuity appealed to Evelyn. In a world that seemed to change faster every year, Wynn's Diner remained defiantly, comfortingly the same. She let herself in through the back door at 7:45, exactly as she always did. Wynn was already there, prepping the grill, his shock of white hair tucked under a paper cap that had gone out of style in 1975. He looked up and grinned. "Morning, Evelyn. Please tell me that's Martha's bear claws." "It is. And she says you need to be in church Sunday or face her wrath." Wynn made a show of shuddering. "Martha Mitchell in full righteous fury. That's more terrifying than any sermon." He accepted the bakery box, opening it to inhale deeply. "God bless that woman. Coffee's fresh. Help yourself." Evelyn poured herself a cup from the industrial pot, adding nothing. She'd learned to drink it black in the Navy. She'd been a yeoman third class, typing duty rosters and discharge papers, while Harrison worked on jet engines and never saw reason to change. The coffee was strong enough to stand a spoon in, exactly how she liked it. The morning prep work was familiar and soothing. Fill salt and pepper shakers. Check ketchup bottles. Wipe down menus. Fold napkins around silverware. Simple tasks, but they mattered. Details mattered. Harrison used to say that about engine work: get the details right, and the big things took care of themselves. By 8 o'clock, the early crowd had started trickling in. Ranchers grabbing breakfast before heading out to check fences. Retirees meeting for coffee and conversation. The Rodriguez family knows she corrected herself, the Hargrove family now. Lydia had remarried last year. Evelyn made a mental note. Names and lives mattered in a small town. The morning rolled forward with comfortable predictability. She took orders, delivered plates, refilled coffee cups, and smiled at familiar faces. This was her congregation, Wynn liked to say. These were her people. At 10:30, she was clearing table 6 when the diner's atmosphere changed. It was subtle at first, like a pressure drop before a storm. The conversations didn't stop, but they shifted, became quieter, more guarded. Evelyn looked up to see 4 young men walking through the door. She knew them, of course. In Silver Ridge, you knew everyone. Cole Brennan led the pack, 20 years of privilege wrapped in designer jeans and an entitled smirk. Behind him came Jason Vicker, Tyler Sutton, and Marcus Webb, 3 local boys who'd attached themselves to Cole like remoras to a shark feeding on the scraps of his father's power. They took the large booth in the back, the one usually reserved for bigger parties. Cole sprawled across the seat like he owned it. In a sense, he did. His father owned most things in Silver Ridge one way or another. Evelyn approached with her order pad and her professional smile. "Morning, boys. What can I get you?" Cole looked up at her, his eyes already showing the glaze of someone who'd been drinking, despite the early hour. The smell of whiskey clung to him like cheap cologne. "Well, well, if it isn't Grandma Thorne." His voice carried across the diner, meant to be heard. "You still working here?" Thought Social Security would have kicked in by now. Evelyn kept her smile in place, though it required effort. "Just earning my keep. What would you like to order?" Tyler snickered. "Maybe you should get yourself a walker instead of carrying those heavy trays. Wouldn't want you breaking a hip." She felt the heat rise in her cheeks, but kept her voice level. "I'm doing just fine, thank you. Now, are you gentlemen ready to order, or do you need a few more minutes?" "Gentlemen," Marcus repeated, drawing the word out mockingly. "Did you hear that? Boys, she called us gentlemen." "4 coffees," Cole said, waving his hand dismissively. "And make sure they're hot this time. Last week, you brought me lukewarm garbage." Evelyn didn't remember serving him last week, but she nodded. "4 coffees coming up." She walked back to the counter, feeling the weight of the diner's attention. Everyone was watching now, waiting to see what would happen. She could see it in their faces, sympathy mixed with relief that they weren't the targets. Fear, too, barely hidden. Fear of Cole Brennan and, by extension, his father. She poured 4 cups of coffee, making sure they were hot as requested. Her hands were steady. 30 years of waitressing had taught her how to carry full cups without spilling a drop. She loaded them onto a tray and walked back to the booth, moving carefully between the tables. 4 coffees, she said, placing the tray on the edge of their table. Hot and fresh. She was reaching for the first cup when Cole's hands shot out and connected with her wrist. Not hard enough to hurt, but hard enough to throw off her balance. The tray tilted. Coffee sloshed over the rim of the cups. Hot liquids splashed across the table and onto Cole's lap. He jumped up, roaring, "Jesus Christ! Look what you did, you stupid old woman!" "I'm so sorry," Evelyn stammered, grabbing napkins. "I didn't mean." Cole's face had gone red. "You just poured scalding coffee all over me. You bumped my hand. Are you calling me a liar?" Cole stepped closer, invading her space. She could smell the whiskey, stronger now, mixed with something else. Anger. Cruelty. "You're saying I made you spill that coffee?" Evelyn looked around for support, for someone to speak up, but the other customers had suddenly become very interested in their plates. Even Wynn had retreated slightly behind his grill, his face troubled but silent. She understood. In Silver Ridge, you didn't cross the Brennans. Not if you wanted to keep your business, your job, your peace. "I'm not calling you anything," she said quietly. "I apologize. Let me get you fresh coffee and a towel." "A towel," Tyler laughed. "Grandma Thorne thinks a towel's gonna fix this." "Maybe she's got dementia," Jason added, pulling out his phone. "You know how old people get confused. Can't hear right, can't think straight." He thumbed his phone's camera on. "This is gonna be good." Marcus had moved behind her without Evelyn noticing. She became aware of his presence when his hands clamped down on her shoulders, firm enough to prevent her from turning around. "Hold still, Mrs. Thorne," he said, his voice cold. "We're just having a little fun. Let me go." She tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. Not painful, they were careful about that, but inescapable. Fear began to pulse through her veins. "Let me go right now." Cole reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small plastic container, the kind fishermen used for live bait. Through the clear lid, Evelyn could see something moving inside. Something with too many legs, its segmented body curling and uncurling. "You know what this is, Mrs. Thorne?" Cole held the container up to her face. "This is a desert centipede. Beautiful creature. 6 inches long. Venomous, too. Not enough to kill you, but enough to make you wish you were dead." "Please!" Her voice had gone thin and reedy with terror. "Please don't. Please don't." Cole mimicked her tone. "But we're just trying to help. Jason here said you might not be hearing too well. We thought maybe this little guy could clean out your ears for you." Tyler was filming now, his phone held up to capture everything. Evelyn could see other customers pulling out their phones too, but not to help, to record, to post, to share. In the age of social media, witnessing had replaced intervention. Cole unscrewed the container's lid. The centipede writhed in his palm, its poisonous forciples flexing. Evelyn tried to jerk away, but Marcus held her fast. "Please," she said again, hating the weakness in her voice but unable to stop it. "Please don't do this." "Just hold still," Cole said, his voice taking on an almost soothing quality, which somehow made it worse. "It'll only hurt for a minute." He brought the centipede toward her right ear. Evelyn turned her head frantically, but Marcus grabbed her chin with one hand, forcing her to face forward. She felt the centipede's legs touching her skin, felt Cole's fingers pushing it toward her ear canal. And then the pain began. The centipede bit her the moment it entered her ear, its venomous forcipules sinking into the delicate tissue of her ear canal. The pain was immediate and overwhelming, a white-hot spike that seemed to drive directly into her brain. She screamed a sound she'd never heard herself make before, raw and animal and desperate. Cole stepped back, laughing. Tyler kept filming. Marcus finally released her, and she fell to her knees, clawing at her ear, trying to get the creature out. She could feel it moving deeper, could hear its legs scraping against her eardrum. The pain was beyond anything she'd ever experienced, beyond the kidney stones that had sent her to the hospital in 2015, beyond the time she'd broken her wrist falling off a horse at age 12. Wynn finally emerged from behind the counter, his face pale. "Get out, all of you. Get the hell out of my diner." Cole turned to him, still grinning. "Or what Irish you gonna call the sheriff?" "Go ahead. My father is the mayor. Sheriff Hendricks works for him. Who do you think anyone's gonna believe us? Or some senile old waitress who probably put that bug in her own ear for attention?" "Get out," Wynn repeated. But there was no force behind it. He knew, just as everyone in the diner knew, that Cole was right. Justice in Silver Ridge flowed from the mayor's office, and Mayor Richard Brennan took care of his own. The four young men walked out, their laughter echoing even after the door swung shut. Tyler was still filming, narrating now. And that's how you deal with bad service in Silver Ridge. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Evelyn remained on her knees, both hands pressed to her right ear, tears streaming down her face. The pain had subsided from unbearable to merely excruciating. She could feel blood trickling down her neck, warm and sticky. The centipede had finally stopped moving, either dead or satisfied with its new home. Wynn knelt beside her, his hands hovering helplessly. "Evelyn, we need to get you to the hospital. Can you stand?" She nodded, though standing seemed impossible. With Wynn's help, she made it to her feet, swaying. The diner had gone completely silent now. 40 or 50 people had witnessed what happened, and not one had intervened. She saw it in their faces, shame, fear, relief that it wasn't them. She didn't blame them. She understood. In Silver Ridge, you learned when to speak and when to stay silent. Speaking up against the Brennans came with a price most people couldn't afford to pay. But someone else could. Across town in a different world that happened to occupy the same Nevada desert, Garrett Ironside Thorne was elbow deep in a carburetor rebuild when his phone rang. The clubhouse of the Iron Brotherhood chapter of the Hells Angels sat 40 miles outside Silver Ridge, far enough to be separate but close enough to matter. It wasn't the Hollywood version of a biker clubhouse, no drugs being counted on pool tables, no half-naked women draped across furniture. Instead, it looked more like a well-organized workshop crossed with a lodge hall. Tools hung on pegboards in precise order. Motorcycles in various states of repair occupied the main floor. A meeting table sat in the back, surrounded by chairs. An American flag hung on one wall, a Hells Angels banner on another. Photos of past members lined a third wall, including several marked with Black Ribbons brothers who'd ridden their last mile. Garrett had been working on a 1995 Heritage Softail for 3 hours, trying to coax better performance out of a carburetor that had seen better days. At 58, he'd been wrenching on bikes for 40 years, had learned at his father's knee in the garage that Harrison and Richard Brennan once ran together. The memory still stung, how two friends could drift so far apart that they became strangers before death finally ended the estrangement. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He wiped his hands on a shop rag, leaving behind dark smears of oil and grease. The number on the screen was local, but not one he recognized. He almost let it go to voicemail, then changed his mind. Instinct, or maybe just habit. "Yeah, Garrett." The voice was familiar. Wynn O'Malley calling from the diner. "Garrett, you need to come to town. It's about Evelyn." Everything in Garrett went still. Not frozen still, like a machine that's been running, suddenly shifting into neutral, all that energy redirected inward, waiting. "What happened to my mother?" Wynn's voice cracked. "Cole Brennan and his crew, Jesus, Garrett, they put a centipede in her ear. Just for fun, just to be cruel. She's hurt and scared," and Garrett didn't remember ending the call. He stood in the middle of the garage, phone in hand, the rest of the world receding to a distant hum. Around him, other members of the chapter were working on their bikes, discussing the upcoming charity ride for Gulf War veterans. Chains McCready was rebuilding a transmission. Diesel Hawthorne was replacing fork seals. Bishop Callahan was reading a parts manual, his reading glasses perched on his nose. Garrett walked to the wall where Harrison's picture hung, one of dozens of photographs documenting the chapter's history. His father looked out from 1987, standing beside a shovelhead, tools in hand, that slight smile that said he knew something you didn't. Garrett touched the frame lightly, a gesture so quick the others might have missed it, but they didn't miss the change in his posture, the way his shoulders set, the way his hands curled into fists before deliberately relaxing. Chains, Diesel, Bishop. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of absolute command. "Gear up, we ride, now!" Chains looked up from the transmission. "What's going on, boss?" Garrett turned to face them, and they saw something in his eyes that made them stand without asking further questions. They'd ridden with Ironside Thorne for years, had seen him calm and angry, patient and decisive. But this was different. This was the moment when a man decided that words were finished and action was required. "Someone hurt my mother," Garrett said simply, "and they're about to learn what that means." He walked to his locker, pulling out his leather vest with the Hells Angels patches. President, Iron Brotherhood Chapter, Nevada. He'd earned every patch through years of service, of standing up for brothers, of representing the club with honor, even when civilians assumed the worst. He shrugged into the vest, checking the Colt 1911 in his shoulder holster, legal licensed and maintained as carefully as his motorcycle. He'd learned from his father, a man took care of his tools, his family, and his responsibilities in that order. The other three were gearing up as well. Chains with his road-worn vest covered in pinback buttons from every state they'd ridden through. Diesel in black leather from head to toe, his sergeant-at-arms patch marking him as the club's enforcer. Bishop with his secretary patch and the bearing of a man who'd served in the Gulf War and came home with the kind of calm that only combat could forge. They walked out to their bikes together. 4 Harley-Davidsons sat in a row gleaming in the late morning sun. Garrett's was a 2015 Road King Black with silver trim, 5 years old but maintained as carefully as if it had rolled off the showroom floor yesterday. He'd logged 60,000 miles on it, knew every quirk of its engine, every particular vibration that meant something needed attention. He threw his leg over the bike, settling into the seat with the ease of long practice. Pushed the starter button. The V-twin engine roared to life, that distinctive Harley sound that was equal parts mechanical symphony and primal roar. Beside him, the other 3 bikes started in sequence, their engines forming a chorus. Garrett didn't look back at the clubhouse. He didn't need to. Everything he needed was with him, his brothers, his bike, and a purpose that burned clean and cold in his chest. They rolled out onto Highway 54 bikes in tight formation. Garrett in front, chains to his right, Diesel and Bishop behind. The morning sun was climbing toward noon now, painting the desert landscape in shades of gold and ochre. The highway stretched ahead, empty and waiting. The speedometer climbed to 70, then 80. Fast enough to matter, not so fast as to be reckless. A man in a hurry could still maintain discipline. Garrett's mind was clear. No rage, not yet. Rage was sloppy, made you do stupid things. Instead, he felt the cold clarity that came from purpose. Someone had hurt his mother, that someone would answer for it. The details could be worked out when he knew more, but the outcome was never in doubt. He thought about Evelyn, 76 years old and still working because she said staying busy kept her young. He thought about her laugh, the way she'd raised him alone after Harrison died, the sacrifices she'd made so he could have a decent life even when money was tight. He thought about her hands, weathered from a lifetime of work, but always gentle when she'd patched his scraped knees or hugged him after a nightmare. And he thought about the last thing his father had told him before the cancer finally won. They'd been in the garage, Harrison too weak to work, but insisting on supervising Garrett's rebuild of a 1972 Ironhead. Harrison had looked at him with eyes that were already seeing beyond this world and said, "Son's strength isn't about how hard you can hit. It's about protecting those who can't protect themselves. That's the only thing that makes a man worth a damn." Garrett had lived by that principle for 40 years. He joined the Hells Angels, not for the outlaw mystique, but for the brotherhood, for the code that said you stood by your own. He'd become chapter president not through violence, but through steadiness, through being the man others could count on when things went sideways. He'd built a reputation over decades with law enforcement, with other clubs, with the community, as someone who could be trusted to keep his word and stand his ground. And now someone had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The miles fell away beneath them. 30 minutes of highway, the landscape barely changing. This was desert country, beautiful in its starkness. Joshua trees stood like sentinels. The mountains rose in the distance, purple against the blue sky. Garrett had ridden this road thousands of times, knew every curve and straightaway. It had never seemed longer than it did now. His phone rang twice during the ride, vibrating against his chest. He ignored it. Whatever it was could wait. Evelyn couldn't. They passed the city limit sign for Silver Ridge at 12:25 p.m. Garrett slowed the pack to 60, then 50, then 45 as they entered the residential streets. No need to announce their arrival with excessive noise. They weren't here to intimidate anyone but one person. Downtown Silver Ridge looked exactly as it always had, small, quiet, going about its business. A few people stopped to watch the 4 Harleys rumble past, but most didn't pay much attention. Bikers passed through Silver Ridge all the time, headed to Reno or Vegas, or just riding for the sake of riding. Wynn's Diner came into view. Garrett could see a small crowd gathered outside, people talking in low voices, that particular body language of witnesses to something unpleasant, trying to process what they'd seen. He pulled to the curb in front of the diner, the other 3 bikes forming up beside him. Killed the engine. Silence rushed in to fill the space left by the V-twins' roar. He dismounted, pulling off his gloves and tucking them in his belt. He was a big man, 6'3", 220 pounds, most of it still muscle despite his age. The leather vest added to his presence made him look even larger. His face was weathered from years of riding in sun and wind, a scar running from his left cheekbone to his jaw from a motorcycle accident at 25. His gray beard was trimmed close. His eyes were pale blue, the kind that seemed to look through you rather than at you. The crowd parted without being asked. Garrett walked into the diner, his brothers following. The interior was familiar. He'd eaten here 100 times over the years, had known Win O'Malley since they were both young men, finding their way. But it looked different now. Tables had been pushed aside, chairs were overturned, and in the back, in the doorway to the kitchen, he saw her. Evelyn sat in a chair, Win kneeling beside her. Her right ear was bandaged, blood soaking through the white gauze. Her uniform was stained with coffee and blood. Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying, but when she saw him, she tried to smile. "Garrett, you didn't have to come all this way." He crossed the diner in 4 strides, dropping to one knee beside her. Gently, so gently, he touched her shoulder. "Mom, show me." She turned her head, revealing the full extent of the injury. The bandage covered her entire ear, blood still seeping through in places. The skin around it was swollen and discolored. He could see where tears had tracked through the powder on her cheeks. "Mom," his voice was barely a whisper. "Who did this?" "It's nothing, really. Just some boys being stupid." "This is not nothing." He made himself breathe, made himself stay calm. Rage wouldn't help her. Rage wouldn't fix this. "Who did this to you?" Evelyn looked at Win, who nodded grimly. She sighed, the sound of someone who knew fighting was useless. "Cole Brennan and his friends. Jason Vicker, Tyler Sutton, Marcus Webb. They were drunk looking for trouble. I was just in the way." "Cole Brennan." Garrett tasted the name, felt it settle in his gut like a stone. "Richard Brennan's son." "Please don't make trouble," Evelyn said quickly. "His father is the mayor. He has connections, power." "I don't care if his father is the president of the United States." Garrett's voice was quiet but absolute. "He hurt you. He's going to answer for that." "Garrett, please. No violence. Your father wouldn't want—" "Dad taught me to protect family." "That's exactly what I'm doing." He kissed her forehead gently. "But I'll do it right. I promise you that." He stood, turning to Win. "Tell me everything." Win did. Every detail, from the moment Cole and his crew walked in until the moment they walked out laughing. Garrett listened without interrupting, his face impassive, but the other members of the Iron Brotherhood could see the tension building in his shoulders, the way his hands kept curling into fists before deliberately relaxing. When Win finished, Garrett nodded slowly. "Anyone get video?" Win hesitated, then gestured to a woman sitting in one of the booths, Lydia Hargrove, owner of the laundromat down the street. She looked terrified but determined. "I did," she said quietly. "On my phone. I was too scared to stop them, but I thought someone should have evidence." "Can you send that to me?" Garrett pulled out his phone, gave her his number. 30 seconds later, his phone buzzed with an incoming file. He opened it, watched the entire horrific sequence. Cole holding up the Centipede, Marcus restraining Evelyn, the moment of violation, her scream. He closed the video and pocketed his phone. When he looked up, his eyes were cold as winter. "Mom, I need you to go home. Lock the doors and windows. Chains will follow you. Stay outside your house." He turned to the shortest of his 3 companions, a wiry man with iron gray hair. "Nobody gets near her. Nobody." "Got it, boss." Chains helped Evelyn to her feet, supporting her gently. "Garrett," Evelyn said one more time. "Please be careful." "I will, Mom, I promise." He watched as Chains led her out to his bike, helped her onto the passenger seat, handed her a spare helmet. The bike's engine rumbled to life, and they pulled away, Evelyn holding tight to Chain's waist. Garrett turned back to Win. "Where do they hang out?" Win pulled out a napkin, scribbled an address. "Rusty's Tavern. Highway 50, about 10 miles east. They're usually there most days, drinking and acting like lords of the manor." Garrett took the napkin, memorized the address, handed it back. "Anyone else they've hurt?" Win's face darkened. "More than I can count. Dutch Reynolds had his welding shop vandalized 3 weeks ago. Spray paint, broken windows. He reported it. Nothing happened. Lydia's laundromat got the same treatment last month. Sheriff Hendricks always finds a reason not to investigate. Says there's no evidence or witnesses won't cooperate, or it's just kids being kids." "Kids?" Garrett's laugh was bitter. "Cole Brennan is 32 years old. That's not a kid. That's a man who should know better." "Should, but doesn't, because his father's the mayor and his father makes sure nothing touches him." Garrett looked around the diner at all the faces watching him. They wanted him to do something. He could see it in their eyes. But they also expected him to fail because everyone who tried to stand up to the Brennans had failed. That was the way power worked in small towns, not through overt tyranny, but through 1,000 small moments where people learned to stay quiet, stay safe, don't rock the boat. "Thank you, Win." Garrett shook the old man's hand. "I appreciate you calling me." "What are you going to do?" Garrett smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I'm going to have a conversation, a polite one, and I'm going to give Cole Brennan a chance to do the right thing. And if he doesn't, then I'll make sure everyone knows exactly who he is. Garrett walked out of the diner, Diesel and Bishop falling in behind him. They mounted their bikes in synchronized motion engines roaring to life in perfect harmony. The sound echoed off the buildings, a declaration and a warning. As they pulled away from the curb, Garrett noticed something odd. A black Cadillac sedan parked across the street engine, running a man in the driver's seat. Not local, the plates were from out of state. The man was watching them, and when he saw Garrett looking back, he raised a camera and took several photos. Garrett memorized the plate number, filed it away for later consideration. Right now, he had more pressing concerns. They rode east on Highway 50, leaving Silver Ridge behind. The speedometer climbed to 85. Fast enough to eat up distance, not so fast as to be reckless. Garrett's mind was already several moves ahead, considering possibilities, planning contingencies. He wasn't going into this blind. The desert stretched around them, vast and indifferent. In the distance, he could see dust devils dancing across the hardpan, ancient whirlwinds that touched down and vanished, according to their own unknowable logic. The sun was directly overhead now, burning down with that particular intensity that only high desert sun could achieve. Garrett thought about Richard Brennan, about the man who'd once been his father's best friend, his business partner, his brother in all but blood. He thought about how power changed people, how it stripped away the parts that made them human and left only the hunger for more power. He thought about his father's disappointment when the friendship ended, the way Harrison would sometimes stare at old photos with an expression of loss deeper than mourning. And he thought about how the sins of fathers got visited on sons, how history had a way of repeating itself in smaller, meaner ways. Harrison and Richard had broken their friendship over principles. Now their sons were going to collide over a centipede in an old woman's ear. If there was poetry in that, it was the dark kind. Rusty's Tavern appeared on the horizon, a low building with a gravel parking lot and a neon sign that probably hadn't worked since 1995. Half a dozen vehicles sat in the lot, including a lifted Ford UF 250 with custom rims and vanity plates that read, Mayor's Son. Subtle, Garrett thought. Real subtle. They pulled into the lot, parking in a line facing the entrance. Killed the engines. The sudden silence was profound, broken only by the ticking of cooling metal and the whisper of wind across the desert. Garrett dismounted, pulled off his gloves. Diesel and Bishop flanked him. They didn't speak, didn't need to. They'd done this dance before in different places for different reasons. The choreography was familiar. Let Garrett do the talking, back him up. If things went sideways, don't escalate unless absolutely necessary. The door to Rusty's Tavern was propped open, probably in a futile attempt to combat the heat. Country music drifted out, something about trucks and beer and lost love. Garrett walked inside, letting his eyes adjust to the dim interior. The bar was exactly what he'd expected. Pool table in the back, jukebox in the corner, neon beer signs providing most of the illumination. The smell of old beer and older tobacco, and at the pool table, 4 young men lined up shots and laughed too loud about nothing in particular. Garrett walked straight toward them, his boots echoing on the scarred wooden floor. Conversations died as he passed. The bartender, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, started to say something, then thought better of it. Cole Brennan was lining up a shot when his shadow fell across the table. He looked up, annoyance flickering across his face. Who the hell are you, old man? Garrett stopped 3 feet away, close enough to be in Cole's space, but not so close as to be overtly threatening. We need to talk about what you did this morning. Cole straightened, cue stick still in hand. Recognition dawned slowly. Oh, I know who you are. You're the biker trash. Grandma Thorne's son. I'm the son of the woman you assaulted. Assaulted, Cole laughed, looking at his friends for support. They laughed too on cue. That's a strong word for a little joke. You put a venomous centipede in my 76-year-old mother's ear while your friend held her down and another one filmed it. Garrett's voice remained level, conversational even. That's not a joke. That's assault, battery, elder abuse. Probably qualifies as a hate crime. A hate crime, Tyler Sutton pushed off from the wall where he'd been leaning. Against what, old people? Against someone who couldn't defend herself, which makes you not just a criminal, but a coward. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Cole's face flushed red. You want to repeat that? I'm not here to repeat anything. I'm here to give you a chance to do the right thing. Garrett pulled out his phone, pulled up the video Lydia had sent him. This is video evidence of what you did. Clear as day. Shows your face, your friends' faces, shows the assault from start to finish. He held up the phone so Cole could see the screen. Watched the young man's face go from red to pale as he recognized himself. Recognized the moment he'd crossed a line. That's private property. You can't. This was taken in a public place by a witness. It's perfectly legal evidence. Garrett pocketed the phone. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to come with me to your father's office. You're going to confess what you did. You're going to apologize to my mother in person. You're going to pay her medical bills. And you're going to turn yourself in to Sheriff Hendricks. Cole stared at him for a long moment, then burst out laughing. Are you fucking kidding me? You think I'm going to do any of that? It's the right thing to do. The right thing? Cole's laugh had an edge to it now. Old man, do you have any idea who I am? Who my father is? I know exactly who you are and who your father is. It doesn't change what you did. It changes everything. Cole stepped closer, jabbing the pool cue toward Garrett's chest without quite touching him. My father is Mayor Richard Brennan. He runs this county. Sheriff Hendricks works for him. The judges work for him. Hell, half the state legislature is in his pocket. You think some video is going to change that? I think the truth matters. The truth? Cole's smile was ugly. The truth is what my father says it is. And right now the truth is that some senile old waitress probably put that bug in her own ear for attention. Or maybe she's just confused. Old people get confused, right? Garrett felt his jaw tighten, made himself breathe, made himself stay calm. Last chance, Cole, come with me now. Do the right thing, or I promise you this video goes everywhere. Every news station, every social media platform. Everyone will know exactly what you did. And who's going to believe some biker trash over the mayor's son? Cole's confidence was backfed by the certainty that he was untouchable. You make any trouble for me, my father will destroy you. He'll have you arrested. He'll shut down your little clubhouse. He'll make your life a living hell. Is that your answer? That's my answer. Now get the fuck out of my bar before I call the sheriff and have you arrested for harassment. Garrett nodded slowly. Okay, I tried it your way. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Cole, you should know I've faced worse than small-town mayors. You and your father are about to find out what that means. He was 2 steps away when Jason Vicker pulled a gun. It happened fast. Jason had been standing off to the side, mostly quiet during the entire exchange. Now he stepped forward, a Glock 19 in his hand, the barrel pointing somewhere in the general direction of Garrett's center mass. Don't fucking move, biker. Jason's voice was high-scared. His hand shook slightly. All of you back against the wall. The bar went completely silent. Even the jukebox seemed to sense the moment ending one song without starting another. Garrett didn't move. Diesel and Bishop had gone very still behind him. 3 decades of brotherhood had taught them to read situations, to know when to act and when to wait. Put the gun down, kid. Garrett's voice was calm, almost gentle. Nobody needs to get hurt. Shut up. Just shut the fuck up. Jason's finger was on the trigger, which was a problem. The Glock's trigger safety was the only thing between everyone in the room in a very bad situation. And then Bishop moved. It wasn't dramatic. It was efficient. One moment Bishop was standing 5 feet behind Garrett. The next moment he was beside Jason, his hand closing over the Glock's slide. He racked it back hard, ejecting the chambered round, then pressed the magazine release. The magazine clattered to the floor. He pulled the slide completely off the frame, disassembling the gun in Jason's hands in less than 2 seconds. He handed the pieces back to Jason, one by one. Frame, slide, magazine, the ejected round last. Safety was off, kid. Bishop's voice carried the weight of someone who'd seen actual combat, who'd been shot at by people who meant it. You'd have shot yourself or someone else, or both. Learn to handle a weapon before you point it at a man. And for God's sake, keep your booger hook off the bang switch until you're ready to fire. Jason stood there holding the disassembled parts of his Glock, face pale with shock. Garrett turned back to Cole. This is your last warning. Walk away from this. Do the right thing. Because next time I come back, I won't be this polite. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. Cole's voice shook with rage and humiliation. My father will destroy you. All of you. You have no idea what you just started. Yes, Garrett said quietly. I do. They walked out of Rusty's tavern in the same formation they'd entered. Behind them, they could hear Cole already on his phone, no doubt calling his father. Garrett expected that. In fact, he was counting on it. They mounted their bikes, started the engines. The V-twin roar seemed louder now, more aggressive. Or maybe that was just Garrett's perception colored by adrenaline and the certainty that a line had been crossed. They rode back towards Silver Ridge, the afternoon sun angling toward the western mountains. Garrett's mind was already moving to the next phase. He'd given Cole a chance to do the right thing. Cole had refused. Now it was time to take this public, to force the issue where neither the Brennans' money nor influence could bury it. But first he needed to make some calls. People who owed him favors. People who understood that sometimes the system needed a push in the right direction. People who believed as he did that justice mattered more than convenience. His phone buzzed as they hit the outskirts of Silver Ridge. Unknown number. He answered without slowing. Yeah, Mr. Thorne. The voice was crisp, professional female. This is Catherine Voss. I believe you've been trying to reach me. Garrett smiled grimly. Catherine, been a long time. I need a favor. That's what they all say. He could hear the smile in her voice. What kind of favor? The kind that ends with a corrupt mayor in handcuffs. There was a pause. Now that sounds like old times. Tell me everything. As Garrett began explaining the situation as the miles fell away beneath his wheels, as Silver Ridge came back into view, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Clear, cold, and absolute. Cole Brennan had hurt his mother. Mayor Brennan thought his power made him untouchable. They were both about to learn a lesson that Garrett's father had taught him 40 years ago. A man protects his own, always, no matter the cost, and sometimes justice required more than words. Sometimes it required a man willing to stand when everyone else sat down. A man willing to speak when everyone else stayed silent. A man willing to put everything on the line because some things family honor principle were worth more than peace. Garrett Thorne was that man, and this story was just beginning. The sun hung low over Silver Ridge as Garrett pulled his Road King to a stop outside Dutch Reynolds' welding shop. The metal building sat on the edge of town, its corrugated walls painted a fading blue that had once been bright, but now carried the patina of desert years. A hand-painted sign over the door read, Reynolds Welding, since 1,978 inches in letters that needed touching up. Garrett killed the engine. Diesel and Bishop pulled up beside him, their bikes settling into silence. The welding shop looked closed, but Garrett could see light coming from the back bay, could hear the faint sound of metal on metal. He walked to the side entrance, knocked twice. The sound inside stopped. Footsteps approached. The door cracked open, revealing a weathered face topped with white hair, eyes narrowed with suspicion that melted into recognition. Garrett Thorne. Dutch Reynolds opened the door wider. Haven't seen you since Harrison's funeral. God rest his soul. Dutch. Garrett extended his hand, felt the firm grip of a man who'd spent 50 years working with his hands. I need to talk to you about Cole Brennan. The change in Dutch's expression was immediate. The welcoming warmth drained away, replaced by something harder, more guarded. He glanced past Garrett to where Diesel and Bishop stood by their bikes, then back. Come in, but I'm not sure what I can tell you that'll help. The interior of the shop was organized chaos. Welding equipment lined one wall. Workbenches covered with projects in various stages of completion filled the space. The air smelled of metal and cutting oil and the particular burnt scent of arc welding. Dutch led them to a small office in the back, hardly more than a closet with a desk and 2 chairs. He gestured for Garrett to sit, remained standing himself. I heard what happened to Evelyn, Dutch said without preamble. Whole town's heard by now. That boy and his friends are poison Garrett. Pure poison. Tell me what they did to you. Dutch hesitated, his hands opening and closing. When he finally spoke, his voice was tight with suppressed anger. 3 weeks ago. Monday morning, I came in to find my shop vandalized. Spray paint all over the walls, words I won't repeat, tools scattered everywhere. They'd taken a sledgehammer to my welding tanks, didn't rupture them, thank God, but dented them good. Cost me $2,000 in damages and a week of cleanup. Did you report it? Course I did. I called Sheriff Hendricks that morning. He came out, took some photos, wrote up a report, said he'd investigate. Dutch's laugh was bitter. You know what came of that investigation? Nothing. Not a damn thing. Week later, I called to follow up. Sheriff said there wasn't enough evidence to pursue charges. Said it was probably just kids being stupid. But you knew it was Cole. I knew. Dutch walked to a filing cabinet, pulled out a folder, handed it to Garrett. My security camera caught them. Not perfect footage, the angle's not great, and they were wearing hoodies, but you can see enough. See that tattoo on the wrist? That's Cole Brennan. I'd stake my life on it. Garrett opened the folder. Security camera stills, grainy, but clear enough. 4 figures in hoodies' faces partially obscured, spray painting the walls. One of them had his sleeve pulled back slightly, revealing a tattoo on his inner wrist. Garrett zoomed in with his phone camera, enhanced the image. The tattoo showed a symbol he didn't recognize, some kind of geometric pattern, almost like a brand. I showed this to Hendricks, Dutch continued. He looked at it for about 5 seconds and said it wasn't conclusive enough for an arrest warrant. Said lots of people have tattoos. Said I'd need more evidence. He took the folder back, replaced it in the cabinet. That's when I knew the fix was in. Sheriff's not going to move against the mayor's son. Not now, not ever. Why didn't you call me? Dutch met his eyes. Because I'm a foolish old man who still believed the law worked in this town. I thought if I followed the rules played by their system, justice would happen. He shook his head. I spent 22 years in the Navy, Garrett. I helped build the ships that kept this country safe. I came home and started this business from nothing, and now I'm scared in my own shop because some punk kid knows his daddy will protect him. That ends today. Does it? Dutch's voice was skeptical. How? What can you do that the sheriff won't? I can make this public. I can make it loud, and I can call in some favors with people who don't answer to Mayor Brennan. Dutch studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Your father was a good man, Garrett. Honest as they come. I owe him. If there's anything I can do to help you, just say the word. I'll need you to testify. Tell your story. Show that footage. You got it. Garrett stood, shook Dutch's hand again. Stay alert. If Cole or his crew come back, you call me immediately. Don't try to handle it yourself. Garrett, I survived the first Gulf War. I can handle some punk kid. I know you can, but you shouldn't have to. They walked back outside into the slanting afternoon light. Garrett could feel the pieces starting to come together, the pattern emerging. This wasn't about one incident. This was systematic. This was what happened when power went unchecked for too long, when fear became the coin of the realm. Next stop was Hargrove Laundromat, a small business tucked between a thrift store and a closed-down insurance office. Lydia Hargrove was inside folding towels with mechanical precision, her movements those of someone trying to lose themselves in routine work. She looked up when Garrett walked in recognition, followed quickly by fear. Mr. Thorne, I heard about your mother. I'm so sorry. Thank you for the video you took. That took courage. She set down the towel she'd been folding. I don't feel very courageous. I watched them hurt her, and I didn't do anything to stop it. You documented it. That matters. Lydia shook her head. Does it? What good is documentation when nothing happens, when the people who are supposed to protect us look the other way? Tell me what happened to your business. She did. 6 weeks ago, early morning, she'd arrived to find both front windows smashed, glass everywhere, graffiti on the walls, half her washers, damaged coins stolen from the machines. $5,000 in damages, not counting lost business, while repairs were made. I knew who did it, she said. Everyone knew. Cole Brennan and his friends had been in here the week before drunk, making comments touching things they had no business touching. When I asked them to leave, Cole said I'd regret it. 3 days later, this happened. And Sheriff Hendricks took a report, said he'd investigate. Called me a week later to say there wasn't sufficient evidence to pursue charges. Said I should upgrade my security system, maybe install cameras. She gestured around the laundromat. You see any cameras here? I can barely afford to keep the lights on. Where am I supposed to get money for cameras? Garrett looked around the laundromat. It was clean, but worn, the kind of place that survived on thin margins and repeat customers. Lydia was maybe 52, dressed practically no wedding ring. Doing this alone, making it work through sheer determination. You're willing to talk about this publicly. If it helps stop them, yes. But I'm scared, Mr. Thorne. I'm scared of what happens after. This is my livelihood. If they come back, if they shut me down, they won't. I promise you that. How can you promise that you're one man? They're the mayor's family. I'm not just one man. Garrett gestured to where Diesel and Bishop stood by the door. And I've got friends who can help. People who owe me favors. People who don't work for Richard Brennan. Lydia studied him with the careful assessment of someone who'd been let down before. Then she nodded just once. Okay, I'll help. For Evelyn, for Dutch, for everyone else they've hurt. But please, Mr. Thorne, don't let them get away with it again. I won't. The third stop was Silver Ridge Community Center, a low brick building that served as library, meeting hall, an informal gathering place for the town's older residents. Irene Patterson was in the library section, helping a young mother find books for her children. She looked up as Garrett entered, excused herself, and walked over with the bearing of a woman who'd spent 40 years commanding classrooms full of unruly teenagers. Garrett Thorne, you've stirred up quite the hornet's nest. Mrs. Patterson. He'd had her for 10th grade English, remembered her as demanding but fair. I need information about Mayor Brennan. She glanced around, then gestured for him to follow her to a back office. Once inside with the door closed, she pulled out a banker's box from beneath a table. "I've been documenting things for 3 years," she said, opening the box, "ever since I realized what was happening to this town. Not officially, I'm just a retired teacher after all, but someone needed to keep track." The box contained newspaper clippings, printed articles, handwritten notes, and official documents. Irene pulled out items one by one, laying them on the table like evidence in a trial. Mayor Brennan has been in office for 8 years. In that time, 17 small businesses have closed. Not because of economics, because of pressure. The owners who refused to sell their properties to Silvercrest Development found themselves facing sudden permit problems, health code violations that didn't exist before increased fees and taxes. She pulled out a ledger where she documented each case. Names, dates, circumstances. The pattern was unmistakable. Silvercrest Development, LLC. Garrett knew the name. It had been on construction signs around town for years. Who owns it? That's the interesting part. It's registered in Delaware, ownership hidden behind shell companies. But I did some digging. She pulled out several pages of corporate filings. Look at the original articles of incorporation from 2016. Right there, the initial board of directors. Garrett scanned the list. Richard Brennan, Frank Hendricks. Cole Brennan listed as treasurer, even though he would have been only 24 at the time. "They've been running a scam for 8 years, Irene said. Buy properties cheap, flip them to developers for huge profits. And anyone who won't sell gets squeezed until they have no choice. It's not just corrupt, Garrett. It's organized crime. How has this not been investigated? Who's going to investigate the sheriffs on the board? The county attorney is Brennan's golf buddy. The state investigators have to be invited in, and the mayor controls those invitations." She pulled out another document. But here's the worst part. 6 years ago, a man named Douglas Whitmore Jr. tried to stop a Silvercrest development. He organized community opposition, filed complaints, threatened lawsuits. 1 month later, his house burned down with him inside. Fire marshal ruled it accidental. "You don't think it was?" "Douglas sent me an email the week before he died." Irene retrieved a printed email from the box. "Here, read it yourself." The email was dated May 3rd, 2018. The message was brief. "Irene, if anything happens to me, look into Brennan. He came to my house last night. Said I was making things difficult for everyone. Said accidents happen when people don't know when to stop. I'm scared. I'm documenting everything, leaving copies with my lawyer. But if something happens, you need to know." 1 week later, Douglas Whitmore Jr. was dead. Garrett read the email twice, feeling cold anger settle in his gut. "Why didn't you take this to the state police?" "I tried. I drove to Reno, met with investigators. They took my statement, said they'd look into it. That was 3 years ago. I've heard nothing since. Either the investigation was buried or someone made it go away. Either way, Douglas is still dead and Brennan is still mayor." Garrett carefully replaced all the documents in the box. "I need copies of everything. All of it." "Already done." Irene pulled out a second box identical to the first. "This is yours. I've been waiting for someone to care enough to do something. I just never thought it would be you." "Why not me?" "Because you're a biker. Because your father and Richard Brennan were friends once. Because I thought you'd stay out of small-town politics." She smiled sadly. "I'm glad I was wrong." Garrett took the box, felt the weight of it. Evidence. Documentation. The truth painstakingly assembled by a retired teacher who understood that someone needed to remember even if justice seemed impossible. "Thank you, Mrs. Patterson." "Don't thank me yet. Thank me when Richard Brennan is in handcuffs." Garrett carried the box outside to where Diesel and Bishop were waiting. The afternoon was stretching toward evening, now shadows growing long. He strapped the box to his bike's cargo rack, secured it with bungee cords. "What's the play, boss?" Diesel asked. "We need a lawyer. Not a local one, someone who doesn't owe Brennan favors." "You thinking who I think you're thinking?" "Yeah, Baxter." Diesel whistled low. "Haven't talked to him in 3 years. He told me if I ever needed help to call. Guess we're finding out if he meant it." Garrett pulled out his phone, scrolled through his contacts to a number he hadn't called since 2021. Sullivan Baxter, former federal prosecutor now in private practice in Reno. The man who'd kept Garrett's undercover work with the DEA sealed away from public record, who'd navigated the legal complexities of taking down the Scorpions MC while protecting Garrett's identity. The phone rang 4 times. Garrett was about to hang up when a familiar voice answered. "This is Baxter." "Sullivan, it's Garrett Thorne." A pause. "Garrett, 3 years. Thought you'd retired from all this excitement." I had. Then someone hurt my mother. Another pause longer this time. Tell me everything. Garrett did. Standing in the parking lot of Silver Ridge Community Center, with the desert wind picking up and the sun touching the mountains, he told Baxter everything. The assault on Evelyn, Cole Brennan's arrogance, Dutch's vandalized shop, Lydia's broken windows, Irene's documentation of systematic corruption, the death of Douglas Whitmore Jr. When he finished, Baxter was silent for a long moment. You understand what you're asking for, Baxter finally said. Going after a sitting mayor, especially one with the connections Brennan has, is going to be ugly. They'll dig into your past. The Scorpions operation will come out. I know. Your undercover work, everything we sealed, it'll all become public. Some people will call you a snitch, a rat. Your reputation in the MC world will take a hit. I know that too. And you're still willing? My mother had a venomous centipede shoved in her ear by a drunk punk who knows his father will protect him. A good man died in a house fire because he stood up to corruption. Dutch Reynolds is afraid in his own shop. Lydia Hargrove is barely holding her business together. Yes, Sullivan, I'm willing. Baxter's laugh was dry. Same old Garrett. Stubborn as hell and twice as righteous. Okay, I'm in. Send me everything you've got, videos, photos, documentation, witness statements. I'll start building a case. But we need more than local evidence. We need federal interest. I'm working on that. Catherine Voss. The Catherine Voss who's now regional director. Garrett, you've been busy. I called in a favor. Must be some favor. Okay, here's what we do. I'll drive down first thing tomorrow morning. We'll meet at your clubhouse, neutral territory away from Brennan's eyes. Bring everyone who's willing to testify. We'll document everything, get formal statements, build this case the right way. How long? If we do this right, 48 hours to have warrants ready. But it has to be airtight, Garrett. One mistake and Brennan's lawyers will bury us. It'll be airtight. I'll see you tomorrow at 8 a.m. No. Garrett ended the call, looked at Diesel and Bishop. We're moving. Baxter's coming tomorrow morning. We need to organize this. Get everyone together who's willing to stand up. That's a lot of scared people, boss. Then we unscare them. We show them they're not alone. They mounted up, rode back toward the Iron Brotherhood clubhouse as the sun finally dipped below the mountains. The temperature dropped quickly the way it always did in the desert, the day's heat surrendering to evening chill. Garrett's mind was already several moves ahead, organizing logistics, anticipating problems, planning contingencies. The clubhouse came into view sitting on 5 acres of hardscrabble land that the club had purchased 20 years ago. It wasn't much to look at: prefab metal building with some additions, gravel parking lot, a few outbuildings, but it was theirs. Paid for, maintained, a place where they could work on bikes and plan charity rides and exist without the judgment of civilians who'd never understand what brotherhood meant. Chains was waiting outside, sitting on the steps that led to the main entrance. He stood when Garrett's bike rumbled into the lot. Your mom's safe. She's at home, doors locked. I stayed outside like you said. How'd it go? We're building a case. Garrett dismounted, stretched. His back ached from hours on the bike, a reminder that 58 wasn't 28. Get everyone together. Church meeting in 1 hour. Anyone who's not here needs to be called in. All of them. Everyone. This is important. Chains nodded and headed inside. Garrett walked around to the back of the building, where a payphone still hung on the wall, an anachronism kept mostly for nostalgia. He pulled out the business card Catherine Voss had given him years ago, the one with her direct line. Called the number. Voss. Catherine. Garrett Thorne. We spoke earlier. I've been doing some preliminary research on your situation. Her voice was all business, the warm familiarity from earlier gone. Silvercrest Development LLC shows up on several of our watch lists. We've suspected money laundering for 2 years, but haven't had enough to move on it. What if I told you I have documentation connecting Mayor Brennan directly to the company? I'd say that's extremely interesting. What kind of documentation? Corporate filings showing him on the original board of directors. A paper trail of property acquisitions that follow a pattern: buy low from people under duress, sell high to developers. At least 17 businesses forced out over 8 years, and a suspicious death of a man who was organizing opposition to one of their projects. Email me everything. Tonight, I'll review it with my team. If this is what I think it is, how fast can you move? If the evidence supports probable cause, we can have warrants executed within 48 hours. We'd be looking at RICO charges, possibly, given the organized nature of the activity. Money laundering, racketeering, corruption, witness intimidation. The sheriff's involved too. Even better, federal law enforcement doesn't need local cooperation. In fact, we prefer operating without it in corruption cases. Garrett felt something loosen in his chest. Catherine, I appreciate this. Don't appreciate it yet. Appreciate it when we have Brennan in cuffs. Send me that documentation. And Garrett, be careful. If Brennan realizes you're building a federal case, he'll escalate. Men like him don't go down quiet. I'm counting on it. He ended the call, walked back inside. The clubhouse was filling up. Word traveled fast in the brotherhood. Chains had called everyone and everyone was showing up. Not just the Iron Brotherhood chapter members from 2 other chapters were riding in, having heard through the grapevine that something big was happening. By 8 p.m., 23 bikers filled the clubhouse. They sat at the long table in the meeting room arranged by chapter and rank. Garrett stood at the head, Diesel on his right, Bishop on his left. The room smelled of leather and motor oil and the particular musk of men who lived hard lives outdoors. Brothers, Garrett began, you've heard what happened to my mother. What you might not know is that this is bigger than one assault. This is about a corrupt mayor who's been squeezing this town for 8 years. It's about good people being too scared to stand up because they know the system's rigged against them. He told them everything. Dutch's vandalized shop, Lydia's broken windows, Douglas Whitmore's suspicious death, the documentation Irene had compiled, the federal investigation Catherine Voss was opening. Here's what I need from you, Garrett continued. Tomorrow morning, we're having a meeting here. Sullivan Baxter, a federal prosecutor, is coming to take statements. We're building a case. I need volunteers to help protect the witnesses to make sure no one gets intimidated or threatened. I need people to spread the word that we're standing up, that anyone else who's been hurt by the Brennans can come forward safely. Boss, one of the visiting chapter presidents, spoke up. With respect, this sounds like you're poking a hornet's nest. What happens when Brennan pushes back? Then we push harder. He's got the local law on his side. We've got federal law on ours. Another voice from the back. What about Cole? That punk's gonna come looking for payback. Let him. We document everything. Every threat, every action, every contact. It all goes into the federal case. The room murmured, brothers talking among themselves. Garrett waited, letting them process, letting them decide. The Hells Angels weren't a dictatorship despite what civilians thought. Important decisions required consensus, required brothers to buy in willingly. Finally, Chain spoke up. I'm in. They heard Evelyn. That's enough for me. In, said Diesel. In, said Bishop. Around the room, one by one, every man present voiced agreement. Some of them had never met Evelyn. Some of them had never been to Silver Ridge. But that was the point of brotherhood. When one was threatened, all stood together. All right, Garrett said. Thank you. Now here's the timeline. Tomorrow, 8 a.m., meeting with Baxter. We take formal statements, document everything. Tomorrow afternoon, we start going public. I want this in every newspaper, every TV station, every social media platform. We make it impossible for Brennan to bury this. What about tonight? Someone asked. Tonight, we protect our own. Half of you are on security detail, rotating shifts, watching Evelyn's house, Dutch's shop, Lydia's laundromat. The other half get rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. The meeting broke up, brothers dispersing to their assignments. Garrett stayed behind, sitting at the empty table, feeling the weight of what he'd set in motion. There was no going back now. He'd drawn a line in the sand, challenged the existing power structure, made himself a target. His phone rang. Unknown number. He answered warily. Mr. Thorne? The voice was male, older, with the polished tones of expensive education. This is County Attorney Mitchell Pearson. I'm calling on behalf of Mayor Brennan. I'm listening. The mayor wanted me to convey his concern about the incident involving your mother. He's deeply troubled by his son's behavior and wants to resolve this situation amicably. Amicably? Yes. The mayor is prepared to offer compensation for your mother's medical expenses. Additionally, Cole will be entering a treatment program for his substance abuse issues. All charges will be dropped and we can move forward without further conflict. In exchange for what? In exchange for your agreement not to pursue this matter further. No press, no lawsuits, no public statements. A quiet resolution that serves everyone's interests. Garrett laughed, a sound without humor. Tell the mayor no. Tell him his son is going to face justice. Tell him his corruption is going to be exposed. And tell him that trying to buy me off just proves everything I suspected about him. Mr. Thorne, I urge you to reconsider. The mayor has considerable resources and influence. Making an enemy of him would be... He made an enemy of me when his son tortured my 76-year-old mother. We're done talking. Garrett ended the call. 5 minutes later, his phone rang again. This time it was Sheriff Hendricks. Garrett, don't hang up. I'm calling as a courtesy. Some courtesy. Listen to me. I know what you're planning. I know you think you're doing the right thing. But you need to understand you can't win this. Brennan owns this county. You push him, he'll push back harder. He'll have you arrested. He'll shut down your clubhouse. He'll make your life hell. He can try. God damn it, Garrett, I'm trying to help you. You want to help me do your job. Arrest Cole Brennan. Investigate Silvercrest Development. Be the sheriff this county needs instead of Brennan's lapdog. It's not that simple. Yes, it is. You just choose comfort over courage. Every single day you make that choice. You self-righteous son of a bitch. You think you're better than me. I think I'm not taking bribes to look the other way while innocent people get hurt. Yeah, Frank, I guess I do think I'm better than you. The call ended. Garrett sat in the silence of the clubhouse knowing he'd just burned 2 more bridges. The county attorney would report back to Brennan. The sheriff would escalate. Things were moving faster now, building momentum. His phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number again. He opened it. Stop now or Evelyn won't be safe. Garrett stared at the message for a long moment. A threat. Direct and unambiguous. He forwarded it to Catherine Voss with a note. Add witness intimidation to the charges. Then he called chains. Double the guard on my mother's house. No one gets near her. No one. Already done, boss. We've got 4 brothers there. She's safe. Keep me updated. Any movement, anything suspicious, I want to know immediately. He ended the call, stood stretched. His body ached not just from the riding, but from the tension, the adrenaline, the weight of responsibility. 58 years old and he was starting a war. Not the war he'd wanted, but the war that found him anyway. Outside night had fully fallen. The desert stars blazed overhead. In that way they only did far from city lights. Garrett walked to his Road King, ran his hand along the fuel tank, feeling the smooth paint, the solid metal. This bike had carried him 60,000 miles. Through every state west of the Mississippi. Through good times and hard times. Through the years after Harrison died, when riding was the only thing that made sense. His father had taught him to maintain his own bike, to understand every component, every system, every potential failure point. A man who can't fix his own ride doesn't deserve to call himself a biker, Harrison used to say. But the lesson was deeper than that. It was about self-reliance, about taking responsibility, about not depending on others to solve your problems. Garrett had built his life on those principles, and now they were being tested in ways his father probably never imagined. Across town in the Brennan estate, different conversations were happening. Cole Brennan sat in his father's study nursing a whiskey and a wounded ego. Richard Brennan stood by the window looking out over the manicured lawn, his face unreadable. That biker humiliated me, Cole said, in front of everyone. You humiliated yourself, Richard replied, his voice cold. By being drunk at 11 in the morning, by posting videos of your crimes online, by pulling a gun in a crowded bar. Jason pulled the gun, not me. You think that distinction matters? Richard turned from the window. You've given them everything they need. Video evidence, multiple witnesses, a clear pattern of behavior. Garrett Thorne is building a case and you've handed him the pieces. So stop him. You're the mayor. You own the sheriff, the county attorney. It's not that simple anymore. Richard pulled out his phone, showed Cole the screen. This is Sullivan Baxter's law firm website. Know who he is? Some lawyer. A former federal prosecutor with a reputation for taking down corrupt officials. He doesn't lose cases, Cole, and he's coming to Silver Ridge tomorrow. Cole paled slightly. So what do? We fight, but we fight smart. Richard made a call speaker on. The ringing filled the room until someone answered. Brennan, it's Richard. We have a situation. I'm aware. The Thorne situation. What do you need? Everything you can dig up on Garrett Thorne. Criminal history, financial records, associates, anything we can use. I need it by tomorrow morning. That's a tight timeline. I don't care. Make it happen. What's the budget? Whatever it costs, just get me something I can use to bury him. The call ended. Richard looked at his son with something between disappointment and calculation. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stay here in this house until this is resolved. No going out, no social media, no contact with your friends. You speak to no one except our lawyer. You're putting me under house arrest. I'm protecting you from yourself. The county attorney tried to negotiate a settlement. Thorne refused. That means this goes public. When it does, the press will be looking for you. They'll want interviews, statements, photos. You give them nothing. Understand? Cole nodded sullenly. Good. Now get out. I have work to do. After Cole left, Richard sat at his desk pulling out that old photograph again. Harrison Thorne and Richard Brennan, 1985, standing in front of their garage. Brothers in Greece, the caption read, before ambition drove them apart, before friendship became enmity. I'm sorry, Harry, Richard whispered to the photograph, but I can't let your son destroy what I've built, even for you. He opened his laptop, began making calls. By midnight, he'd mobilized his network journalists, he'd cultivated judges, he'd helped elect business owners who owed him favors. When the sun rose tomorrow, he'd be ready. Or so he thought, because 40 miles away in a metal building surrounded by motorcycles, Garrett Thorne was doing the same thing, making calls, mobilizing resources, preparing for war. The difference was that Garrett was fighting for justice, and Richard Brennan was fighting to maintain power. In the end, only one of them could win. The night deepened. Stars wheeled overhead. The desert held its breath, waiting for dawn and whatever it would bring. And in her small house on Pinewood Drive, Evelyn Thorne lay awake despite the pain medication, listening to the rumble of Harley engines outside her window, knowing her son had placed guards to protect her. She thought about Harrison, about the man he'd been, the principles he'd lived by, about how proud he'd be of Garrett right now, standing up for what was right, even knowing the cost. Your boy's just like you, Harry, she whispered to the darkness, stubborn and righteous and too brave for his own good. I hope you're watching. I hope you're proud. Outside, Shanes McCready circled the block for the 10th time that night, his eyes scanning for threats. Behind Evelyn's house, two more brothers watched from positions that gave them clear sightlines to all approaches. And parked 2 streets over a black Cadillac sedan, sat with its lights off, a man inside making notes, documenting everything. The pieces were all moving now. The board was set. Tomorrow would bring confrontation, revelation, and the beginning of the end for Richard Brennan's kingdom. But tonight, in the quiet hours before dawn, there was only waiting, and the sound of Harley engines standing guard through the darkness. Dawn broke over Silver Ridge with the kind of clarity that only high desert mornings could achieve. The sky shifted from black to navy to a pale crystalline blue, and the sun emerged from behind the Sierra Nevadas like a promise being kept. Garrett Thorne had been awake for 2 hours, already drinking coffee in the clubhouse kitchen while reviewing documents one more time. Sullivan Baxter arrived at 7:45, driving a gunmetal gray Mercedes that looked out of place in the gravel parking lot. He stepped out wearing a suit that probably cost more than most bikes here, his silver hair combed back, his briefcase expensive leather. But his handshake was firm, and his eyes were sharp, and Garrett was reminded why this man had never lost a federal case. Garrett, you look like hell. Didn't sleep much. I'd be worried if you had. Baxter surveyed the clubhouse, the dozen Harleys parked in careful rows, the brothers beginning to gather. Quite the operation you've got here. We take care of our own. So I see. Where can we set up? They used the main meeting room, clearing the table and setting up Baxter's laptop and recording equipment. By 8:15, everyone was assembled. Dutch Reynolds arrived first, wearing clean work clothes and carrying a folder of documentation. Lydia Hargrove came next, nervous but determined. Irene Patterson brought her boxes of evidence, setting them down with the satisfaction of someone who'd been waiting years for this moment. Win O'Malley closed his diner for the morning, putting up a sign that read, "Back at noon." And at 8:30, Evelyn Thorne arrived with chains. Her right ear still bandaged, her face pale, but her spine straight. "Mom," Garrett stood when she entered, "you should be resting." "I'll rest when this is finished." She took a seat at the table, folding her hands in front of her. "Let's get started." Baxter recorded each testimony, methodically asking precise questions, documenting times and dates and specific details. Dutch described the vandalism, showed his security footage. Lydia recounted the destruction of her laundromat, producing receipts for repairs. Irene walked through her documentation of Silvercrest Development's pattern of property acquisitions, each one following the same formula of pressure, followed by purchase, followed by profitable resale. Wynn testified about the assault he'd witnessed, his voice shaking with suppressed anger, as he described watching Cole Brennan torture an old woman while he'd stood paralyzed by fear of retaliation. And Evelyn, speaking in a voice that barely rose above a whisper but carried absolute conviction, told her story from beginning to end. The mockery, the spilled coffee, the hands holding her down, the centipede, the pain that felt like her skull was splitting open. Baxter recorded it all, his expression never changing, but Garrett saw his jaw tighten when Evelyn described the moment Cole pushed the centipede into her ear canal. By noon, they had 6 formal statements, all recorded and notarized. Baxter had filled a legal pad with notes, cross-references, potential charges. He sat back, removing his glasses to clean them, a gesture Garrett recognized as him thinking through strategy. "This is good," Baxter finally said. "Better than good." We have clear documentation of assault, elder abuse, property damage, witness intimidation, and a pattern of corruption that spans 8 years. Combined with what Catherine Voss is developing on the RICO side, we have enough for federal warrants. How long? Garrett asked. Catherine said she can have warrants ready by tomorrow morning. Federal agents will execute them simultaneously at the mayor's office, his home Silvercrest Development headquarters, and Sheriff Hendrick's office. Everything gets seized: computers, files, financial records, communication devices. Once that happens, the state attorney general's office will take over the local prosecution. What about Cole? He'll be arrested on assault charges, federal and state, given that the victim is over 65 and the assault involved causing injury through use of a dangerous animal. He's looking at 10 to 15 years if convicted. Evelyn made a small sound. Garrett reached over, squeezed her hand gently. He hurt you, Mom. He has to face consequences. I know. I just never wanted to be the reason someone went to prison. You're not the reason, Irene said firmly. His choices are the reason. His father's protection is the reason. You're just the catalyst for justice that should have happened years ago. Baxter packed up his equipment. I'm heading back to Reno now to coordinate with Catherine. Garrett, I need you to keep everyone safe and quiet until tomorrow morning. No public statements, no confrontations. We need Brennan to think he's still in control. What if he doesn't wait? What if he moves against us tonight? Then we document everything, every threat, every action. It all becomes evidence. Baxter stood, extended his hand to Garrett. You did good work here. Your father would be proud. After Baxter left, the group sat in silence for a moment, processing what they'd set in motion. Finally, Dutch spoke. So now we wait. Now we wait, Garrett confirmed. But we don't wait alone. Brothers from 2 other chapters are staying through tomorrow. We've got rotating security on everyone who testified. Nobody moves without protection. Garrett, Wynn said, you're putting yourself in danger for us, for people who let you down when Evelyn needed help. You didn't let anyone down. You were scared. That's what men like Brennan count on. That fear will keep good people silent. But you're speaking up now. That's what matters. Lydia stood, smoothing her skirt. I should get back to the laundromat. I've been closed all morning. Diesel will go with you, Garrett said. Stay in public view. Keep your phone on. You call immediately if anything feels wrong. One by one, the witnesses departed, each accompanied by an Iron Brotherhood member. Within 20 minutes, only Garrett, Evelyn, and Chains remained in the clubhouse. I'm taking you home, Mom. You need rest. I need to go back to work. Wynn needs me. Wynn closed for the day. He'll manage. You need to heal. Evelyn studied her son with the particular intensity of mothers who can read their children's souls. You're planning something. I'm planning to see this through. That's not what I mean. You're planning something for today before the warrants are executed tomorrow. Garrett should have known better than to try hiding things from her. There's something I need to do. A conversation I need to have. With Richard Brennan. With an old friend of Dad's, yes. Garrett. Evelyn reached up, touched his face gently. Your father and Richard were like brothers once. What they had, what they lost, it broke Harrison's heart. Don't let their failure become your war. This isn't about their friendship, Mom. This is about right and wrong. Is it? Or is it about a son trying to finish something his father started? The question hung in the air between them. Garrett didn't have an answer that satisfied even himself. Either way, he finally said, I'm going. Chains will take you home. He walked Evelyn out to Chains' bike, made sure she was settled safely, watched them ride away toward Pinewood Drive. Then he turned to Bishop, who'd been waiting silently by his Harley. You coming? Wouldn't miss it, boss. They rode through Silver Ridge at midday when the sun was at its apex, and the heat shimmered off the asphalt in visible waves. The town looked different to Garrett now, like he was seeing it clearly for the first time. All those storefronts that had closed over the past 8 years, he'd noticed them before, but never questioned why. The for-lease signs, the empty buildings, the businesses that vanished and were replaced by development projects. The pattern had been there all along, hidden in plain sight, because that's how corruption worked in small towns. Slowly, quietly, one pressure point at a time. The Brennan estate sat on 5 acres at the edge of town, behind a wrought iron fence and a circular driveway. The house was colonial style, 2 stories of white siding and black shutters, more suited to Virginia than Nevada, but making a statement nonetheless. Money, power, permanence. Garrett pulled up to the gate, pressed the intercom button. A moment later, a voice crackled on through the speaker. State your business. Garrett Thorne to see Mayor Brennan. A long pause. Then the gate began to swing open. Garrett and Bishop rode through parked their bikes in front of the house. The door opened before they reached it, revealing a man in his early 30s wearing slacks and a polo shirt, probably some kind of aide or assistant. "Mr. Thorne, the mayor is expecting you. Your friend will need to wait outside." "My friend comes with me." The aide looked uncertain and nodded. "Follow me." They were led through a foyer with marble floors and a chandelier that probably cost more than Garrett's bike down a hallway lined with photographs of Richard Brennan shaking hands with various politicians and celebrities, and finally to a study. Dark wood paneling, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive desk positioned to catch the light from tall windows. And behind the desk, looking older than Garrett remembered, sat Richard Brennan. 62 years had been kind to him in some ways. His hair was silver, but full, his face lined but distinguished. He wore a three-piece suit despite the heat projecting authority even in his own home. But his eyes were hard, calculating, nothing like the warm gaze of the young man who'd posed with Harrison Thorne in that photograph from 1985. "Garrett," Richard gestured to the chairs in front of his desk. "Sit." Garrett remained standing. "This won't take long." "Suit yourself." Richard leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "I assume you're here because the county attorney's offer wasn't satisfactory? I'm here to give you a chance your son didn't give my mother, which is a choice. Tomorrow morning, federal agents are executing warrants on your office, your home Silvercrest development, and the sheriff's office. They're seizing everything: financial records, communications documents. The charges will include racketeering, money laundering, corruption, witness intimidation, and conspiracy. Your son will be arrested for assault, elder abuse, and hate crimes." Richard's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Fear, maybe, or calculation. "You think you can threaten me in my own home?" "I'm not threatening, I'm informing. But I'm also offering you something your son didn't offer anyone he hurt: dignity. You can cooperate with the investigation, provide testimony about Silvercrest's operations, help the federal prosecutors understand the full scope of what's been happening. In exchange, they might recommend leniency." "Leniency?" Richard's laugh was bitter. "You want me to roll over, confess everything, destroy myself to satisfy your sense of righteousness? I want you to do the right thing. For once, after 8 years of doing the wrong thing? You self-righteous son of a bitch." Richard stood, his face flushing. "You come into my home, threaten my family, preach to me about right and wrong. You're a biker, Garrett, an outlaw. Your whole life is built on breaking the rules. I've never hurt anyone who didn't deserve it. I've never stolen from people too weak to fight back. I've never let my son torture an old woman for entertainment. Cole made a mistake. Cole committed a crime, multiple crimes, and you've been covering for him his entire life, teaching him that consequences don't exist if you're powerful enough." Richard walked to the window, staring out at his manicured lawn. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, almost reflective. "Your father and I were friends once, best friends. Did he ever tell you about the garage we were going to open together?" "He mentioned it. We had plans, real plans. We were going to build the best custom motorcycle shop in Nevada. Your father would handle the mechanical work, I'd handle the business side. We'd be partners, equals, building something that mattered." He turned back to Garrett. "But then I saw an opportunity. A chance to do more than fix bikes. A chance to shape this town, to make it into something better. I ran for city council, then mayor, and your father couldn't understand why I wanted more than grease under my fingernails. He understood. He just saw what it was turning you into. And what was that? Someone willing to sacrifice principles for power." Richard's face hardened again. "Principles don't build towns. Principles don't create jobs or improve infrastructure or attract development. Power does that. Vision and power wielded correctly. Except your vision required crushing anyone who disagreed with you. Dutch Reynolds, Lydia Hargrove, Douglas Whitmore, who died because he opposed one of your projects. Douglas Whitmore died in an accident. You threatened him a week before that accident. I did no such thing. He sent an email documenting your threat. We have it, along with 8 years of financial records showing the pattern of Silvercrest's operations. Irene Patterson has been documenting everything, Richard. Every shady land deal, every business you forced out, every person you squeezed. It's all there in black and white." For the first time, Richard looked genuinely shaken. He returned to his desk, sat heavily in his chair. "What do you want from me, Garrett? I want you to face what you've done. I want you to admit that you let power corrupt you. I want you to understand that your son learned his cruelty from watching you. Cole is his own person. Cole is your creation. You taught him that rules don't apply to people like him. You taught him that wealth and position mean you can hurt others without consequences. Every time you covered for him, every time you made his problems disappear, you reinforced those lessons. And now an innocent woman has been tortured because your son believed he was untouchable. Richard was silent for a long moment. Finally, he reached into his desk drawer and pulled out that old photograph, the one from 1985. Harrison and Richard standing together grinning at the camera, covered in grease and full of hope. "I've looked at this every day for 20 years, Richard said quietly. "Every time I make a decision, every time I use my power, I look at this and wonder what Harrison would say, what he would think of the man I've become." "What do you think he'd say?" "I think he'd be disappointed." Richard set the photograph down gently. "But I think he'd also understand that the world isn't as simple as he wanted it to be. That sometimes you have to make hard choices, compromise your ideals to achieve greater good. There's no greater good that justifies what you've done." "Maybe not," Richard met Garrett's eyes. "But I'm not going to roll over for you or anyone else. If federal agents come tomorrow, I'll fight. I have the best lawyers money can buy. I have connections at every level of state government. This will be a war, Garrett, and wars are expensive and ugly and destroy everyone involved." "Then you're choosing to go down fighting." "I'm choosing to protect what I've built. For 30 years, I've served this town. I've brought in development, created jobs, improved quality of life. Yes, I made compromises. Yes, some people got hurt along the way, but the greater good, the greater good." Garrett's voice rose for the first time. "You want to talk about the greater good while my 76-year-old mother is home with a bandaged ear because your son thought it would be funny to torture her. While Douglas Whitmore's dead, while good people are afraid to speak up because you've created a system where power protects itself. Lower your voice in my home, or what? You'll have me arrested." Sheriff Hendricks already tried that. Didn't work. Because for once, Richard, you're facing someone who isn't afraid of you. Someone who can't be bought or intimidated or made to disappear. Richard stood again, his face flushed with anger. "Get out. Get out of my house before I have you thrown out." "I'm going. But understand something. Tomorrow morning, everything changes. Your kingdom falls. And maybe when you're sitting in a federal courtroom listening to the charges against you, you'll finally understand what my father tried to tell you 20 years ago. Which was that a man's worth isn't measured by what he controls, but by who he protects. And you, Richard, have spent 8 years protecting only yourself." Garrett turned and walked out, Bishop following silently. They mounted their bikes and rode back through the gate without looking back. Neither of them spoke until they were miles away, back on Highway 50, the Brennan estate, disappearing in their mirrors. "That went well," Bishop finally said, his voice dry. "He's not going to cooperate." "Figured that much." "What now?" "Now we wait for tomorrow, and we make sure everyone stays safe tonight." They returned to the clubhouse to find it buzzing with activity. Word had spread through the brotherhood that something major was happening. Members from 3 chapters had gathered along with their families in some cases, creating an impromptu community. Someone had set up a grill cooking burgers and hot dogs. Kids ran around between the bikes while their fathers stood in small groups talking in low voices. Chains approached Garrett as soon as he dismounted. "Boss, we've got a problem." "What kind of problem?" "Cole Brennan and his crew showed up at Lydia's laundromat 30 minutes ago. Started making threats. Diesel called it in. We've got 4 brothers there now, but it's tense." Garrett's jaw tightened. "Where are they now?" "Still there. Standoff situation. Diesel says Cole's drunk aggressive looking for a fight. Let's go." Garrett, Bishop, and Chains rode back into town, picking up 2 more brothers on the way. They arrived at Hargrove Laundromat to find a scene that could explode into violence at any moment. Cole's lifted F-250 was parked at an angle across the entrance. Cole and his 3 friends stood in front of the laundromat's door, blocking it. Inside, Garrett could see Lydia and 2 customers trapped. And between them and Cole stood Diesel and 3 other Iron Brotherhood members, arms crossed, faces impassive. Garrett parked and walked over the crowd, parting to let him through. Cole saw him coming and his face twisted into a sneer. "Well, well, if it isn't the old biker come to save the day again. Cole, walk away. Now. Or what you gonna call your lawyer? You gonna tell my daddy?" Cole laughed, but it had a manic edge. He'd been drinking. Garrett could smell the whiskey from 10 feet away. "I'm done being told what to do by you and everyone else. You're drunk. You're making threats in public. You're going to be arrested. By who's Sheriff Hendricks? He works for my father." Cole stepped closer, invading Garrett's space. "You think you're so tough? You think your little biker gang scares me? We don't want to scare you. We want you to leave this woman alone. This woman, Cole gestured wildly toward Lydia. This woman testified against me. She's trying to destroy my family. She deserves whatever happens to her. Nothing's going to happen to her. You sure about that? Cole pulled out his phone, held it up. I got friends. Lots of friends. All it takes is one call, and this place burns to the ground tonight. Garrett heard the distinct sound of multiple phones starting to record. The crowd that had gathered, shop owners, residents, people drawn by the commotion, were documenting everything. Good. Make that call, Garrett said calmly. Give us more evidence. Make the charges against you even worse. Please, Cole, keep going. Cole's face purpled with rage. You think you're so smart. You think you've got me beat. But tomorrow morning when federal agents show up, you know what they're going to find: nothing. Because my father has lawyers who are smarter than you'll ever be. Because he has friends in places you can't even imagine. Because power protects itself, old man, and you're just a biker with delusions of righteousness. We'll see. Yeah, we will. Cole turned to his friends. Come on, let's get out of this dump. They climbed into the F-250 Cole, gunning the engine unnecessarily before peeling out tires squealing. The crowd watched them go, then slowly dispersed. Garrett went inside the laundromat where Lydia was shaking, but unhurt. Are you okay? I'm scared. He said he'd burn this place down. He's not going to. We'll have people here all night. Garrett looked at Diesel. Rotating shifts. 2 brothers minimum at all times. Got it, boss. They stayed until Lydia closed up for the evening, then escorted her home. By the time Garrett returned to the clubhouse, it was past 8 p.m. The impromptu gathering had evolved into something like a party families eating, together kids playing brothers, talking and laughing. It felt like clan gathering before battle. Everyone coming together because they knew tomorrow would change everything. Evelyn was there sitting in a lawn chair with a paper plate of potato salad, talking with some of the brothers' wives. She looked up when Garrett approached. You should be resting, Mom. I've been resting all day. I needed to see people. She gestured to the gathering. This is nice. Reminds me of the old days when your father would have shop parties. Everyone would come, bikers, mechanics, neighbors. He loved that sense of community. Garrett sat on the ground beside her chair, suddenly exhausted. I saw Richard today. I figured, how did it go? About as well as expected. He's not going to cooperate. He's going to fight. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. You know, when Harrison and Richard first became friends, I thought they'd be in each other's lives forever. They were like brothers. But then Richard started changing, getting ambitious, getting ruthless, and Harrison couldn't watch his friend become someone he didn't recognize. He tried talking to Richard many times, but Richard was convinced he was doing the right thing, that his vision for the town justified his methods. And maybe in his mind it did. That's what makes corruption so insidious, Garrett. It doesn't feel like corruption to the people doing it. It feels like necessary compromise. Dad never compromised his principles. No, he didn't. And sometimes I wondered if that made life harder for him. If being so rigid, so unbending in his ethics cost him opportunities. But then I'd see how people looked at him with respect, with trust, and I knew he'd made the right choice. Your father slept well at night because his conscience was clear. Richard Brennan doesn't sleep well anymore. I could see it in his face. Then maybe there's hope for him yet. Evelyn reached down, touched Garrett's shoulder. Tomorrow when those federal agents come, this town is going to change. Power structures will fall. New people will rise. And in the chaos, there will be opportunities for redemption or revenge. Make sure you're choosing the right one. I'm choosing justice. Justice and revenge can look very similar from certain angles. Don't let your anger at what Cole did to me turn into something your father wouldn't recognize. Before Garrett could respond, his phone rang. Catherine Voss. Garrett, status update. We're executing warrants at 6 a.m. tomorrow. We'll have 15 agents on site, 5 at the mayor's office, 5 at his residence, 5 at Silvercrest Development Headquarters. State police will simultaneously arrest Sheriff Hendricks and Cole Brennan. It's going to be coordinated, fast, and overwhelming. What do you need from me? Keep your people out of the way. This is a federal operation. The last thing we need is bikers getting in the middle of an arrest. Can you guarantee that? Yes. Good. Also be prepared for media. This is going to be big news. Former mayor arrested on corruption charges, his son on assault charges. Every news station in Nevada will be here. Some national outlets too, probably. Understood. One more thing. Baxter tells me you confronted Brennan today at his home. I gave him a chance to cooperate. That was stupid and could have compromised the investigation. Don't do anything like that again. We're so close to finishing this. Don't screw it up with heroics. No more heroics, I promise. I'll call you when it's done. She ended the call. Garrett stood, looked around at the gathered brotherhood and their families, at the kids playing and the adults talking, and his mother sitting peacefully in her lawn chair. This was what he was protecting. Not abstractions like justice or principles, but actual people. Real lives that could be crushed or freed depending on what happened tomorrow. Brothers, he called out. Everyone stopped talking, turned to face him. Tomorrow morning, federal agents are executing warrants. Mayor Brennan, his son, and Sheriff Hendricks will be arrested. This town is going to change, and we're going to make sure that change is for the better. A cheer went up from the gathered bikers. Garrett held up his hand for silence. But tonight we protect our own. We've got security shifts covering every witness. We stay alert. We stay together. And tomorrow we let justice happen the right way. The night wore on. Families eventually departed, leaving just the core brotherhood members. They sat around a fire pit someone had built, passing around bottles of beer, telling stories, doing what they'd always done, being brothers in the truest sense. Garrett sat slightly apart, watching the flames dance, thinking about his father, about the garage Harrison and Richard had planned to open together, about friendships broken by ambition, about sons carrying forward their father's battles whether they wanted to or not. Around 3 a.m., he finally went inside to sleep for a few hours. His phone buzzed with a text message just as he lay down. Unknown number. Last chance. Drop this or people get hurt. He forwarded it to Catherine Voss and Baxter, added witness intimidation to the growing list of charges. Then he closed his eyes and tried to sleep, knowing that in 3 hours, everything would change. He dreamed of his father. Harrison standing in the garage, young and strong, covered in grease, smiling that knowing smile. In the dream, Harrison spoke. "You're doing the right thing, son. Stay the course." Garrett woke at 5:30 to the sound of bikes starting up. Brothers were already moving into position, setting up perimeter security, making sure no one interfered with the federal operation. He splashed water on his face, pulled on his leather vest, checked his phone. Catherine had texted at 5:15, "Agents in position. Go time in 45 minutes." At precisely 6 a.m., as the sun crested the eastern mountains and painted Silver Ridge in shades of gold and amber, 15 federal agents in tactical gear executed 4 simultaneous warrants. They swept into the mayor's office, his home Silvercrest Development headquarters, and Sheriff Hendricks' office, with the practiced efficiency of people who'd done this many times before. Garrett watched from a distance as agents emerged from the mayor's office, carrying boxes of documents, hard drives, file cabinets. Similar scenes played out at the other locations, and in front of the Brennan estate, he saw Richard Brennan being led out in handcuffs, his face ashen, his expensive suit wrinkled from a sleepless night. Behind him came Cole, also cuffed, his arrogance finally giving way to fear. The news crews arrived within minutes, cameras rolling, reporters shouting questions. The story spread like wildfire. Corrupt mayor arrested, years of systematic corruption exposed, federal investigation revealing massive fraud. By noon, it was national news. By evening, it was trending on every social media platform. And through it all, Garrett stood with his brothers, watching justice finally arrive in Silver Ridge, Nevada. Slow but unstoppable, exactly as it should be. Tomorrow would bring trials and testimonies and the hard work of rebuilding a town's faith in its institutions. But first, there were immediate consequences to witness. By 8 a.m., news vans lined Main Street like a convoy. Reporters from Reno, Las Vegas, even a crew from CNN, all jostling for position outside the sheriff's station where Richard Brennan and his son were being processed. Garrett watched from across the street, leaning against his road king, as federal agents led a handcuffed Sheriff Hendricks out of his own building. The man who'd chosen comfort over courage now faced the cameras he'd spent years avoiding. A reporter thrust a microphone toward Hendricks. "Sheriff, do you have a statement about the corruption charges?" Hendricks kept his eyes down, said nothing. But Garrett saw something in his face, not defiance, but relief. The weight of 8 years of compromise finally lifting. By noon, the full scope of the investigation had leaked. Silvercrest Development's financial records revealed a pattern so blatant it shocked even the federal prosecutors. 17 properties acquired under duress, $23 million in fraudulent transactions, paper trails leading directly to Richard Brennan's personal accounts. But there was one mystery Garrett still needed solved. At 2 p.m., he rode to the Silver Ridge police impound lot, where they'd towed the black Cadillac sedan, the one that had been following him since day one. A young DEA agent named Torres met him at the gate. "Mr. Thorne, Agent Voss said you'd want to know about this." Torres led him to the Cadillac, registered to a private investigation firm out of Reno. Brennan hired them 3 days before the assault on your mother. 3 days before? Apparently, he'd gotten wind you were asking questions about Cole's previous incidents. Wanted to build a file on you. Criminal history associates anything he could use for leverage. Torres opened the car's trunk, revealing boxes of surveillance photos. Garrett at the diner, at Dutch's shop, at Lydia's laundromat. When the warrants came down this morning, the PI cooperated immediately, gave us everything, including recordings of his conversations with Brennan, conspiracy to intimidate a witness, obstruction of justice. It's all on tape. Garrett picked up one of the photos himself, standing outside Wynn's diner, checking on his mother. He was building a case against me while I was building one against him. Difference is his case was built on intimidation. Yours was built on truth. Torres closed the trunk. The PI's testimony sealed it. Brennan's lawyers can't wiggle out of this one. That evening, Garrett gathered everyone at Wynn's diner, now reopened but closed to the public, for a private meeting. Dutch, Lydia, Irene, Wynn, Evelyn, and a dozen members of the Iron Brotherhood filled the booths and counter stools. Outside, 2 news crews waited, having gotten word that the witnesses were meeting. Sullivan Baxter stood at the front, legal pad in hand. I wanted to give you an update before it hits the news tonight. The U.S. Attorney has filed formal charges. Richard Brennan RICO, conspiracy, money laundering, corruption, witness intimidation, and accessory to the death of Douglas Whitmore, Jr. He's looking at 25 years minimum. A murmur ran through the diner. Cole Brennan, aggravated assault, elder abuse, hate crimes, witness intimidation, given his prior record and the severity of the assault on Mrs. Thorne. The prosecutor is pushing for 15 years. No plea deals. Both Brennans will stand trial. Lydia raised her hand timidly. What about Sheriff Hendricks? Hendricks cut a deal. He's pleading guilty to corruption and obstruction charges in exchange for testimony against the Brennans. He'll serve 5 years, but he's also agreed to forfeit his pension and resign effective immediately. Good, Dutch muttered. Man chose wrong too many times, Baxter continued. The state attorney general has appointed a special prosecutor to handle the local cases. There will be restitution for every business that was damaged or forced out. The Silvercrest properties are being seized under asset forfeiture laws. The proceeds will go to victims. Irene spoke up. What about Douglas Whitmore's family? The FBI reopened that investigation this morning. They found evidence in Brennan's seized computer's emails discussing taking care of the Whitmore problem mispayments to an individual with known arson experience. It's now a murder investigation. Baxter's expression was grim. Douglas Whitmore's widow will finally get justice. The room fell silent. After a moment, Wynn stood. I think we owe someone here a debt of gratitude. He looked at Garrett. Most of us were too scared to stand up. This man wasn't. He risked everything because it was right. I didn't do it alone, Garrett said. Dutch gave evidence even though he was afraid. Lydia testified knowing they might come after her business again. Irene documented everything for 3 years, waiting for someone to care. Mom endured torture and still had the strength to speak up. You all did this. I just helped make sure people listened. Evelyn reached over, squeezed her son's hand. Your father would be proud. Not because you won, because you did it the right way. Justice, not revenge. Catherine Voss arrived as the meeting was breaking up. She pulled Garrett aside, her expression serious. We need to talk about what happens next. They walked outside into the evening air. Main Street was quieter now, the news crews having gotten their footage and departed. There's going to be backlash, Catherine said. Some people in the MC world won't like that you worked with federal law enforcement. Twice now. The Scorpions operation and this. I know. Your reputation as a clean operator will help, but there will be clubs that won't ride with Iron Brotherhood anymore. Are you prepared for that? Garrett looked down Main Street at the town that was already beginning to heal. I made peace with that decision the moment I called you. Some things matter more than reputation. Your father really did raise you right. Catherine smiled. For what it's worth, the DEA considers you a friend. If you ever need anything, I'll call. But I'm hoping for a quiet life from here on out. After this, somehow I doubt it. She shook his hand. Take care of yourself, Garrett. And take care of that town. They're going to need good people to help rebuild. 2 weeks later, on a crisp November morning, Silver Ridge held a special election for interim mayor. Frank Hendricks had resigned as promised. The council needed someone to serve until the next regular election. Garrett stood outside the community center, watching voters stream in. Dutch had convinced him to attend, saying the town needed to see that change was real. Inside, the ballot had 3 names. One of them was Irene Patterson. I can't believe I let them talk me into this, Irene said, standing beside Garrett. She wore a navy pantsuit, her gray hair styled professionally. I'm a retired teacher. I have no business running a town. You documented corruption for 3 years when everyone else looked away. You understand how power should work and how it shouldn't. This town needs that. By 8 p.m., the results were in. Irene Patterson, 67% of the vote. The other two candidates weren't even close. As Irene took the stage for her acceptance speech, Garrett slipped out the back. He'd never liked crowds or attention. He rode through Silver Ridge one more time that evening, seeing the changes already taking shape. Mitchell's Bakery had a new sign under new ownership. The previous owner, Martha Mitchell, had bought back the building from Silvercrest, seized assets for a fraction of what she'd been forced to sell it for. Dalton's Hardware was expanding, knocking down a wall into the vacant space next door, another Silvercrest property now sold back to the community at fair prices. Dutch's welding shop had a fresh coat of paint and a new sign, Reynolds Welding, 46 years of honest work. Lydia's laundromat had lines of customers waiting for machines. Word had spread about her courage in testifying. The community was supporting her with their business, and Wynn's Diner had a waiting list for tables every night. Garrett rode out to the cemetery as the sun touched the western mountains. Harrison Thorne's grave sat under an old oak tree, the headstone simple, beloved husband and father. He kept his word. Garrett placed the photograph from 1985 on the headstone, Harrison and Richard young and hopeful standing in front of their planned garage. But this time he didn't leave it there. He took out a lighter. You gave him every chance, Dad. He chose wrong. But I finished what needed finishing. The right way. Your way. He burned the photograph, watching it curl and blacken. The past was the past. Some friendships couldn't be salvaged. Some betrayals couldn't be forgiven. And that was okay. Justice didn't require reconciliation. He stood there until the last ember died, then rode back toward the clubhouse. 3 months later, the trials began. Garrett attended every day of Richard Brennan's trial, sitting in the back row where the mayor couldn't avoid seeing him. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records, witness testimony, the PI's recordings, Hendrick's cooperation. By the end of week 2, even Brennan's expensive lawyers were recommending a plea deal. He refused. Pride or delusion, or maybe just the inability to accept that his kingdom had fallen. The jury deliberated for 4 hours, guilty on all counts. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. The judge, a woman in her 60s who'd grown up in Silver Ridge, looked at Richard Brennan with something between pity and contempt. Mr. Brennan, you held a position of public trust for 8 years. Instead of serving your community, you exploited it. Instead of protecting the vulnerable, you empowered those who preyed on them. The law allows me to sentence you to a maximum of 30 years. Given the scope of your crimes, including your role in the death of Douglas Whitmore Jr., I am sentencing you to 25 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole. Richard Brennan showed no emotion, but as the marshals led him away, he looked back at Garrett one last time. What passed between them wasn't hatred or regret. It was simply the end. Cole Brennan's trial was shorter, but no less damning. The video of Evelyn's assault played in open court. Lydia testified about the harassment and property destruction. Dutch described the vandalism. Victim after victim took the stand. Cole's lawyer tried to argue that his client had substance abuse issues, that he needed treatment, not prison. But when the prosecutor played Tyler Sutton's social media video, Cole laughing while Evelyn screamed in pain, the jury's faces hardened. Guilty on all counts, 15 years, eligible for parole after 10 with good behavior. As the bailiffs took Cole away, he looked at Garrett with pure hatred. "This isn't over," he mouthed. Garrett didn't respond. For Cole, it was over. He just didn't know it yet. 6 months after the federal raid, on a warm spring evening, Silver Ridge held a community celebration in the town square. The occasion, the grand reopening of Morrison and Reynolds custom motorcycles. Dutch Reynolds had approached Garrett 3 months earlier with a proposal. "Your father and my father were friends. Your father and Richard Brennan planned a garage together, but that fell apart. What if we honored Harrison's dream properly this time? Partners, equals." Garrett had been skeptical at first. He had the clubhouse, his brothers, his life on the road. But Dutch persisted. "I'm 72 years old. I can still work metal, but I can't run a business alone anymore. You've got the business sense, the connections, the reputation. Together we build what our fathers should have built." The garage sat where Dutch's welding shop had been expanded into the lot next door. Through the large bay windows, you could see classic motorcycles in various stages of restoration. A 1947 Knucklehead, a 1965 Panhead, a 1978 Shovelhead, the same model Harrison had owned. The grand opening drew 300 people, members from 5 different Hells Angels chapters, veterans from the Gulf War, families from Silver Ridge who'd been helped by the charity rides Garrett organized. Mayor Irene Patterson cut the ribbon. This garage represents everything Silver Ridge should be. Honest work, fair dealing, community over profit. Harrison Thorne would be proud. Inside, mounted above the main workbench, hung a new photograph. Harrison Thorne, 1987, standing beside his shovel head, that knowing smile on his face. Below it, a brass plaque, built on principles, not promises. As the celebration wound down, Evelyn found Garrett in the back office going over invoices with Dutch. "You're doing paperwork at your own grand opening." She shook her head. "Come outside. There's someone who wants to meet you." In the parking lot, a young man stood beside a beat-up Honda motorcycle, maybe 22 or 23, wearing mechanic's coveralls with Miguel stitched on the pocket. "Mr. Thorne, I'm Miguel Whitmore. Douglas Whitmore was my uncle." Garrett shook his hand. "I'm sorry about what happened to him." "Me too, but I wanted to thank you. The FBI reopened his case because of you. They arrested the man who started the fire last month. My family finally has justice. And," he gestured to his Honda, "I'm starting community college in the fall. Mechanical engineering. The restitution money from Silvercrest assets it's paying for school. My uncle always said education was the way out. Now I can do it. Your uncle was a brave man. He stood up when it mattered. So did you." Miguel extended his hand again. "When I graduate, if you need a mechanic who actually knows what he's doing, I'd be honored to work here. You've got a job waiting, no question." As Miguel rode away on his beat-up Honda, Evelyn slipped her arm through Garrett's. "You gave that boy hope. You gave this whole town hope. I just did what Dad taught me. Protect those who can't protect themselves." "Yes, and look what it built." She gestured to the garage, the community gathering, the town that was healing. "Your father's dream finally realized. Just took 30 years and a different partner." That night, after everyone had gone home, Garrett sat alone in the garage with the lights off, looking at his father's photograph in the moonlight streaming through the windows. His phone buzzed. A text from Catherine Voss. "Thought you'd want to know? Richard Brennan's appeal was denied. He'll serve the full 25 years. It's over." Garrett typed back, "Thank you for everything." He put the phone away and sat in the silence of the garage, breathing in the smell of motor oil and metal and possibility. This is what his father had wanted. Not revenge against Richard Brennan, not even justice necessarily. Just a place where honest work meant something, where people treated each other fairly, where power couldn't corrupt the vulnerable. Harrison Thorne had tried to build that with Richard Brennan and failed. Now Garrett had built it with Dutch Reynolds, and it would stand. He locked up the garage and rode home through Silver Ridge's quiet streets, past Wynn's Diner, where the lights were finally off after a busy day, past Lydia's laundromat, where the open sign glowed in the window, past Dutch's house, where the porch light was on, and the old man was probably already asleep, past the community center, where Irene Patterson's office light still burned as she worked late, rebuilding a town's government from the ground up. And finally to Evelyn's house on Pinewood Drive, where his mother had left the porch light on for him, like she had when he was a boy. He cut the engine and sat on his bike for a moment, looking up at the desert stars, clear and bright and infinite. Somewhere up there, he liked to think Harrison Thorne was watching. Proud not because his son had won, but because he'd fought the right way, with truth, with courage, with principles that couldn't be bought or intimidated or compromised. "Rest easy, Dad," Garrett whispered to the stars. "Your town is safe, your dream is real, and your son kept his word." The desert wind picked up, carrying the smell of sage and possibility. Tomorrow, Garrett would open the garage at 7 a.m. Dutch would arrive at 7:30. They'd work on the knucklehead rebuild together, teaching each other, learning from each other, building something that would outlast them both. Tomorrow, Evelyn would go back to work at Wynn's Diner, her ear fully healed, her spirit unbroken. Tomorrow, Silver Ridge would continue healing one day at a time, one honest transaction at a time, one act of courage at a time. But tonight, Garrett Thorne allowed himself to simply be. Not a chapter president, not a crusader for justice, not a son avenging his mother. Just a man who'd done what was right and found peace in the doing. He dismounted his Road King, walked up the steps to his mother's porch, and used his key to let himself in. Evelyn was waiting up, reading in her favorite chair, a cup of tea cooling on the side table. "How was the celebration?" she asked. "Good, really good." He kissed her forehead. "I'm going to stay here tonight if that's okay. I'm too tired to ride back to the clubhouse." "Your room is always ready. I changed the sheets this morning." He smiled. "Some things never changed. mothers always taking care of their sons no matter how old they got. As he headed upstairs to his childhood bedroom, still decorated with posters from the 80s, still smelling faintly of his teenage years, he paused on the landing. From here, he could see into the living room where Evelyn sat reading peaceful and safe. He thought about Cole Brennan's words, "This isn't over." But it was. Cole would spend the next decade in prison learning that actions had consequences. Richard would spend his final years behind bars, his kingdom reduced to a 6 by 8 cell, and Silver Ridge would rebuild itself into something stronger, something better, something true. The story was finished. Justice had been served, the good people had won, and Garrett Thorne, 58 years old, and finally at peace, climbed the stairs to his childhood bed and slept better than he had in years. Because sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys really do win. And the old values, loyalty, honor, standing up when it matters, still mean something. The desert night settled over Silver Ridge like a blessing. The stars wheeled overhead. The wind whispered through the sage. And in a small house on Pinewood Drive, a mother and son slept peacefully, knowing that tomorrow would bring not fear but hope. Justice had come to Silver Ridge, and it was here to stay.